Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology, providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in the show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we talked to Kyle Garza about moving from a student to a professional programmer. Kyle is a software engineer who started programming from an early age. He currently works for one of the US's largest defence contractors, and prior to this, he used to assist struggling students in software and web development courses, including mobile. So welcome to The Cynical Developer, Kyle.
Thanks, James. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and talk to us about this.
No worries. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting. We've done a few shows before on how to get started as a programmer or a developer, how to get your first job, how to move up through the ranks and that. But of course, those shows have always been my opinion, my experience, and very much based in the UK. Whereas yourself, you're in the States. So I think it should give a slightly different perspective on what we've talked about before, and as you've helped a lot more students and things like that, I think there might be some little bits of magic in there that I don't know about.
Yes, I agree. I think a big point too is in our field, computer science, everyone's very opinionated. So, for example, what may make sense to you may not make sense to me, or even be agreeable to me. So I can imagine that both you being in that region and me being in the U.S. Not only is it different to get inside the whole system as a general, as terms of a position goes, but more so the different methods of how to do that.
Yeah.
So when I was helping out students, I did that for about a year, and I noticed that many of the students, unfortunately, at that time, if they got to me, they're in a very poor position in terms of grade. As for obvious reasons, if you're looking for help, you're probably not understanding things very well.
Yeah. You need somebody to give you that step up and push you on, because obviously, if you're not struggling, then you don't need any help.
Exactly. So with that being said, at first I just kind of pointed them to different resources and essentially Stack Overflow. I'm sure we both know that website.
Yeah.
But I realized about a week in, fortunately, that there was much more to it. I realized that everyone has a different approach, just like we mentioned earlier, and that everyone needs a tailored and specific path, because no two people go the same route,
Sure.
Despite having the same knowledge or background or even skills. So I started researching for myself initially on how to essentially get ahead. I remember many times I was sitting after doing homework, I'm like, I that feeling when you should be in a much better space than you are currently, but you're trying to figure out how to essentially break the wall down that may be keeping you behind. That was a giant struggle, so I began researching different ways and different strategies to get the foot in the door for different jobs and essentially start developing professionally.
Nice.
So while doing that, I noticed that there's actually many tools out there, and of course with many tools comes many opinions. But it seems that one topic I really want to focus on are shaped skills. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before.
No, I haven't. I think it's going to be quite interesting to get into those, and sitting there and sort of trying to work out how you get through to the next part and how you knock down those walls is definitely something that resonates with me. I think through my sort of college years and my university years, maybe less my university, but definitely in college and when I was in school, I always found it quite difficult to concentrate and get things done in school. And never really had anybody to sit down with and say, well, this is the way that you go. This is how you do it. So having somebody like yourself, I think would have been great. But it took me until sort of the end of college and until I was in university really to find out for myself and work it out on my own how to actually achieve these things. But even now, I do sit around and sort of think, oh, right, this is what I need to achieve. How do I achieve it? And I've got a bit of a formula now going that I use to work out what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing and things. And I'm actually putting together a bit of a course on it, which hopefully will be coming out sometime this year, so people can benefit from that. But before that, you talked there a little bit about skill patterns and shape patterns, but I don't know anything about those, or I might know about them under a different name. So yeah, let's have a chat about them. What's a skill pattern?
That might be the very case, especially with the different regional terms.
Sure.
So as far as history shows, in 1991, it was first coined by Tim Brown. He's the CEO of a company called IDEO. Right. It's more of a design company. I don't really know much about that, aside from that specific individual. And essentially, it's an HR tool that pretty much allows HR staff to quickly determine, is this candidate fit for the job, or is he, deviating off and he does not have the required skill, or right. More so didn't list the skills we need.
So it's a bit of a profiling system like the Myers-Briggs system. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not very familiar with that one. Can you go into more details about that?
Yeah, that one is it asks you a series of questions, and it keeps asking you a series of questions. And when you actually think about what it's asking you the same things over and over again in slightly different context, and it tweezes out of you your personality type. So it can tell you whether what sort of roles you would be suited for your personality trait. Maybe you're extroverted, maybe you're introverted, maybe you're very perceptive to things when you talk to somebody, or it's more of a feeling that you get and stuff like that. It's quite good. There's a lot of free tests out there and things to do. I think I've actually got one on my Android device, which, let me just see if I've actually still got it on there. No affiliation with this application at all. Let me just see. Personality Match, it's called. And you go through on this, and you ask the series of questions, and it gives you a 4-letter acronym, and mine is ENFP, which means extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. So it says I'm quite extroverted, which is very odd, because I used to be very, very introverted. Intuitive is that I think I like to use my intuition rather than the facts. So I go with an intuition and the feeling of stuff, and perceiving as well. I can't remember exactly what the perceiving's for, but it gives me a characteristic of champion, and it gives you characteristics and things: warm and genuine, interested in people, enjoys being around people, able to relate to others, and feel that they think as they do. Dislikes performing boring, mundane, and routine tasks. Resists being controlled and directed by others. Usually able to grasp difficult concepts and theories with ease. And it's quite funny. It's a bit like horoscopes, I guess. At sometimes, you can read into some of the points in many different ways and make it fit you. But as I said, I think what mine, it used to be INFJ, I think. But obviously over time I've changed, and personality-wise, and I know that we used that in university to sort out teams. So you could pick out someone that was going to be a leader, someone that was going to be a follower, someone that was going to do a lot of work, and someone that was going to go out there and get the facts to make sure that the work that was done was right. And they used that to separate us out into little working groups, so they sort of knew more or less that the groups would work.
Yeah, after you described yes, I guess the definition that you most fit, I think I've heard of that test. It sounds like it's more so on the behavioral side of it. So of
Yes.
course that's a big part of HR. I think that's the first part. Actually, they want to make sure that you can get along with them,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
more
definitely.
so they can at least bear to be in the same office as you.
Yeah, but if you've done a lot of those Myers-Briggs ones, you can twist it as well. So if you're a raging psychopath that gets on with absolutely nobody, and a bit of a sociopath, you could go through, do the test, sort of game it a little bit, and still get the job at the end of it out of that. But I think what we're going to talk about is a little different.
Yeah, that'd be quite the surprise, actually, if you're the hiring manager and someone were to squeeze through the cracks, and next thing you know,
Yeah,
you have many problems on your hand. But
yeah,
I guess maybe that's why they actually have the shape skills, or more so the skill patterns I'm about to talk about, to not only see if they can get along with you, but that you actually have the skills that you need for the job.
yeah,
Because this is much more difficult to manipulate. It's almost as if you were to, for example, if I were to say I was, a expert OS developer and got an interview and they began asking me questions, I would crash and burn very quickly.
sure.
So the different shapes, the most common one that a new college student has is an I shape. So you can imagine literally a straight line. Now what that means is they have one focus skill,
Yep.
and not many skills that support this. So you can imagine almost like a mountain, but instead of a mountain where, it builds up to the peak being your greatest skill, the slope upward being supporting skills,
Yep.
it's just a straight pillar up.
Sure.
Now, of course, this makes sense. For example, if, using some of the students I helped, if they began learning C#, and they're, to the whole console right line and doing different for loops and conditionals, they're only focused on that specific task, which could be, basic syntax or structuring. If you ask them to do like file IO or anything of that nature, it's most likely not going to work. So they'll have the I shape. And again, it means pretty much a single skill with very little support.
Right. Okay.
Now, when you get to about junior or senior year, so about year 3 or 4, you begin branching out. You begin being able to see, now that I know the basics and have that foundation, I really like, for example, machine learning, which is something I'm interested in. So if I continue learning, the basic foundation, but then sprout off to the machine learning, in this case TensorFlow, I begin widening that mountain, to use imagery as an example. So instead of the I, it becomes a T. Now, as you can imagine, the T is the width of skills that you have, and then the stick of the T is your strongest skill.
Yep.
So you always want to have that key point, that key skill. And the reason being is this: if you have a skill set that is across the board and there's nothing that really sticks out, there's actually a term for that, and it's called the generalist. And as described, and as the word hints, you have general knowledge of many things, but
Yep.
you're not really not good, but you're not really focused on one specific skill that makes you stick out from potential candidates, or even being on a team. For example, you mentioned that you use that for school in regard to the behavioral test. If you were to
Yep.
apply this and someone was across the board, they most likely won't be picked for a school team even.
Right.
So that T pattern is really the goal to have. Now, there's one more pattern. I wanted to include this because I know this discussion's more so for college students, but to include the older crowd and professional crowd, I'm sure they've heard of this as well, perhaps. It's called the X shape. Now, this is kind of, at first, it sounds like an abstract concept, but if you think about it, say you've been at a senior development position for 10 years, you're not only going to be working on a specific skill set, you're going to need to learn other things. For example, if you're a software engineer and you're working closely with DevOps, you're going to need to know their skill set as well. So the X essentially represents that you're very skilled in one thing and also skilled in another. And that way you can collaborate and use the different skill sets of your team because you can identify their patterns as well, which are most often at that position going to be a T. Now, to give an example of who has an X-shaped pattern, most likely will be, of course, managers, and most specifically Scrum leaders. I'm sure we're all familiar with that word. Agile environments, that's a new thing. So, yes, those are the main three. The I, which is, most likely a new student. The T, it's that student that's ready to sprout, essentially. And then the X, which is that extremely seasoned professional who's been in the field, whatever it may be, for quite some time. So I like to go back to the T shape for a minute. Now, when comparing the I and T, I'm sure in school, do you remember those students who, if they were good at one thing, we kind of naturally assume that they're good at other things?
Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah. You've always got the small amount of the small kids that you tend to look at and go, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could. And there was definitely a couple of those, especially with the likes of maths or math. There was I remember there being a couple of guys that were really, really good at that, and you naturally assume that they were good in every other subject as well, and it often wasn't the case.
Exactly, and there's actually a word for that. It's called the halo effect.
Right.
And that's essentially what you said. If someone's good at one thing, we can assume that they're most likely good at another. So if you imagine if you're really good at, say, C# or Swift or something, we'll assume that you're good at something else that's associated with that. But if you're an I pattern, they may not look at you the same, or you may lose credibility. So that's, again, focusing on the T pattern. That was pretty much a basic of it. If you want to research more, I believe you said you'll provide a link, but that's a very strong concept to know, especially because I like to discuss how to essentially shape our skills to the position we want.
Yeah. So how does that fit in with moving from students and becoming a professional programmer? If you're aware that because you've just come out of college that you've got this I shape pattern on your experience, on your resume, your CV, what should the students be doing to try and broaden it out and move, I guess, towards this T shape?
The first thing, of course, I believe is awareness and understanding that you need many skills, not just a few, in order to really get your foot in the door. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a while, probably halfway through year one, where I was thinking, this stuff is really easy personally, and I want to challenge myself, but I don't want to challenge myself in an academia way, but more so practical way, meaning a job. Sure. So this is when I began researching, like I noted, and I saw that, okay, all of these jobs that I'm looking for, you see the requirements, which, there's a ton usually, some which you aren't really sure even mean.
Yeah.
But of course, it's ordered from most important to least in most cases. So if a student that's, within year one or two is able to identify that it's always good to keep learning, especially in our field, I think that it's like a life sentence of learning, if you ask me. Yeah. That the least productive thing that you can do is settle. And by settle, I mean do a coursework assignment, turn it into a test, and get an A or so on it, and then settle at that. That, in my opinion, won't get you very far. You need to go above and beyond. And by doing that, you can change the I into a T much quicker.
Yeah. And that's going to set you up really for the rest of your career as well. Because in my experience, there are two types of developers. And one of them is that they learn a language, like they learn C# or they learn Java, and that's all they do. They might just do C# back-end stuff. That's it. They don't branch out and they don't do any of the front end stuff. They don't look at HTML or JavaScript or CSS. They don't go and look at SQL or anything like that. They become very narrow-minded on what they do, and they're not interested about finding anything else. And then you get the other group of developers that are always quite hungry to go and learn about the new technologies that are out there, and they're always trying to find out what's going on, and even the stuff that they feel that they know a lot about, they need to learn. And I think that's something that every developer should be taught from the get-go, is that in this industry you will never know everything, and it's every day is a school day. Basically, you're going to learn something new every day that you write code.
I agree with you 100%, especially when you're mentioning that a tunnel vision almost appears where, say, you're learning C#, like you mentioned, and then suddenly you figure, oh, I just need to know C#. Who cares about, JavaScript, Java, or so on? And that essentially, just like a tunnel, is a one-way, just like the eye. So by understanding this concept earlier, I think that many people will be able to learn much more and learn much more quickly, because if you're able to translate, say, you're going from C# to Java, which is very similar, next thing you know, you're able to write and read two languages, which makes your resume look much better. So yeah, that's a terrific point. Now, sure, we may know what a skill pattern is now, but when we're looking at the available jobs out there, or the job postings, and we see, we want 5 years of, some kind of server management, or some kind of software development, Scrum environment experience. Sure. I think that many people don't realize that in these postings, that is for the optimal candidate, like the 99.9 percentile, which simply may not exist. And to be honest, my opinion is that they put all of these requirements on to scare people away, so they don't even apply. Yeah. So as a student, I'm not sure exactly what time. I think, to be honest, once a student is familiar with the basics, they should begin applying, and just being honest with the recruiter or HR, or not HR, because they hardly know much about the technical side. But once you get to the manager, if you get that far, explain that you're willing to learn, because just that effort of being both honest and starting so early really shows that they can build you up in the company and, promote your professional development. So backtracking a little bit, when we see the job posting and see the different skills, we understand our own skill set, say that we're really good at C#, have some server management skills, and then also maybe some kind of algorithm skill. So the algorithm, and the algorithm and server skills supporting the C#. If we find a job that's similar in that, but say, they want someone who is, proficient in the MySQL syntax or something of that nature, we just easily study for that and essentially change our shape pattern into what it is looking for. Not exactly, because that'll be nearly impossible if you want to apply to many jobs, because else you'll be studying for one specific job, and what happens if you don't get it? You've essentially put all your eggs in one basket.
Sure.
So I think that is a strong strategy to essentially tailor your skills to not one job, but many that require or have similar requirements, which in most cases, a lot of the junior level and mid-level, if you look, it may have different terminology, but it's essentially the same thing. And once you get in, you'll learn the system, you'll apply these skills, and then go from there. There's no harm in asking questions either.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that you should be honest with the person that you're interviewing and saying, you don't have this skill, but you're willing to learn, or you know a little bit about it, but you're willing to learn. And I think being upfront and honest about it very early on is a good thing, because being someone that's worked as a developer, as a hiring manager, as a team lead, I've often been put in the position where I've been told by my senior, my line managers and that the position that I have to fill when I'm hiring somebody is that of what they see as a graduate developer, so somebody fresh out of university. But I find that often their view on what somebody fresh out of college or university is very skewed to the reality. The reality of it, at least in my opinion, is when you leave university, you've got some working theoretical knowledge, but you don't know how real world applications get put together, because you've done courses online and that, and a lot of those don't tell you how to build real world applications. They just teach you the skills to that you will need to build those applications eventually. But what my line managers have often thought of as someone leaving university or college is that they can build applications, they know what it's about, and above all, they're cheap. Because you don't charge as much. And then I've had people come in, they've flown through the interview, they've been very confident, been able to answer the questions on the technology, but when it's come down to the actual crunch, they've not been able to deliver. And then I've had to fight their corner with the other managers, or when I was a developer with the actual team manager that hired them, and say, look, you did hire a college leaver that hasn't done this sort of thing before. What's your real expectation here?
Yeah, that really resonated a lot. That's going to the interview with my current position. I was honest, and of course I have the position now, so hopefully I have some skill. But yeah, I think that for the general student who, graduates high school, goes into university, wherever it may be, I feel that it's such a difficult decision in terms of specialization, because now we've established that, sure, you may know C#, but there's a million different ways you can use C#, whether it be like a web application or some other sort of system, without listing them all.
Yeah,
so
definitely. It's something that resonated a little bit with me, because I always say that I specialize in being a generalist. Is that I touch a lot of different technologies and can build pretty much anything that's needed. My knowledge goes to a certain depth of I know what I need to know to get the job done, but maybe don't know that slightly deeper part of a system that 90% of the time you're not going to need to know. And people keep saying to me, you need to specialize, you need to focus on something, find something that you enjoy, and that you're getting something out of, and try and focus on that. And that's something I'm looking for at the moment. I've been playing with Alexa and skills like that at the moment. I shouldn't have said her name. There she goes in the background. Yeah,
she's listening into us.
Yeah. I do normally mute her on the desk when I start recording, but I forgot to do that today. So I've been playing around with the Alexa skill sets and stuff, and I'm building things there, and that's quite been quite interesting. And maybe that's the route of specialization I might go down at some point.
And of course, I feel like we're going somewhere with this conversation, because what you just mentioned resonated again. You said specifically that others, I'm sure we've all heard it, say, you need to specialize in something, right?
Yep.
Now, I feel that schools do the same thing, instructors do the same thing. And of course, I have my own opinion on instructors, but everyone is willing to give that advice. Oh, James, you need to specialize in something. But no one ever says what. No one ever provides those tools. You know what I mean? Because, sure, for example, I like to play video games every now and then, but the realism is that if I build video games or something of that nature, I'm not really going to probably be living a lifestyle that I want for obvious reasons. Whereas the harder tasks and the harder industries, I guess harder with quotes around it, based on perspective, often pay more because it's not as leisurely as, the easier way to do things. So to tie that in with the skills, I feel that if we're able to look at a job that we want, so say that, and I'm using games because the school I went to had a lot of students who were going for game development. Sure. So it was game development and software development, and then web and mobile.
Yeah, that's always always an area I try to deter people away from to be honest, because it's
don't worry, I do the same.
Yeah, low pay, high stress, lots of hours, long hours, no work-life balance, but you get to work on making games. Yeah, no, exactly. I'd rather just go and get some data, take it out of a database, do some stuff with it, and stick it back in, get paid nice amount of money for it, and just get on with it, sort of thing.
Reboot the SQL or reboot the server every few days.
Yeah.
Land 100,000+.
Keep it simple.
Exactly. So, as far as, especially with the game development, I also share similar views with you. I figure that many of those students should just go software development, because if you know how to make software, you know how to make a game. Despite all the technicalities I'm sure many right now listening to this are probably having, who have potentially taken a course like that. Sure, you need to know all the engine process, but if you've made it through a software development degree or software engineering, I'm sure it won't be more than a stone's throw away to get used to that.
Yeah.
And of course, to get used to that, you just need to modify your T-shaped skills, and next thing you know, you're eligible to be on a team that's working on something like that.
Yeah, I always make the joke that I have no experience of making games. My knowledge of writing a game is that there's a loop, and that's it. And we're actually going to be talking to somebody about making games with .NET in a coming up episode, which should be very interesting.
I think so. I wonder. Hopefully, they stick with their plan, especially after this discussion about game development. But
you've just destroyed the world.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So I feel that I know we've covered many topics, and it's probably kind of blurry to a listener, but the main point is understanding our skills, understanding what the position we want requires, and not changing our skills totally, but shifting our skills to allow us to maintain a solid shape pattern, in many cases T, because I'm sure once you're senior leader somewhere, you have your own thing going on. But again, we're focusing on getting that job initially and going through people like James to fight in our corner for us.
Yeah.
So look at positions, like I said. Look at your skills. Be honest with yourself. Just because I've bumped into, and I even myself was a student. More so when I was 13 years old, I made my first Java Snake game, and I thought I was ready to build a whole, missile defense system for the U.S. government. But realistically, all I knew was to make some simple shapes in Java and go from there. Of course, using your most favorite game loop.
Well, we all start somewhere. My first flurry into programming, where I had a bit of a clue what I was doing, because as a kid I'd played around with programming on a Commodore 64, but not really ever understood what I was doing. And then I came back into it with Visual Basic, and my first applications were message boxes that would pop up on the screen and capture your cursor, and you couldn't get out of the message box because the OK button would move out of the way, and we used to install those on the college computers. Not that I'm condoning doing anything malicious like that at all, but
I was going to say that's quite the fun game.
Yeah, that's where it started.
99 out of 100. But yeah, exactly. That is exactly where that starts. And I guess now that we're taking the not so fun skeletons out of the closet, of course, when learning things like that, we're interested in, like for example, mine was more so the not so good programs on a computer, such as, viruses or that. I was really interested in how that works and how that can essentially move around our computer as
Sure.
bytes and be undetected. So I
Yeah,
did a lot
yeah.
of research. Of course, I didn't make any, but just understanding it, built on my starting knowledge and helped me in later times, especially just understanding how memory works,
Yeah.
going from there. So, like you said, we always start somewhere, and then yeah. I think that the one last key point I have, aside from the T-shaped skills, honesty, and then um, going above and beyond as much as you can, is that understanding that, like you mentioned, academia versus practical use is completely different. I remember when I had a job prior to this, actually. I've had quite a few. Some were like private clients, and another was a company itself. I remember I was like, oh, I was essentially, I wasn't fresh out of school because I was still in school, but I had that mindset of, oh, I did, X, Y, and Z at school. I'm ready for this. And then when I saw such a large project I was working on, I was like, oh, this is not like the school's 200-line programs that score an A plus. So
Sure.
just excuse me, I was getting ahead of myself. So I think a solution to that would be to continuously work on side projects and looking at I guess open source projects that are out there that are very large, and trying to not fully understand the system, but understand, piece by piece how they've implemented it and try to see the reason why. Of course, in many cases it may not be the best implementation, but in the real world, we're not going to be dealing with, perfect design pattern, thought up UML diagrams. It's more of a, if it works, good. We'll refactor later. I'm sure you can agree with that, James.
Yeah, definitely. And for all the people listening out there that are still in education and they're just about to take their leap into the professional world, you've been told about this one word called documentation. You've probably written loads of documentation for everything that you've built in college. It doesn't exist in the real world, for the most part. If you end up somewhere where they have real documentation and the documentation keeps up with the software, fantastic. I'm yet to actually find somewhere that does that.
Yeah, especially the latter of keeping up with the latest version.
Yeah,
that's a feat in itself.
yeah, it definitely is, because in your current position as a student, you are writing the documentation and writing the software, but in the real world, you are fixing bugs and building features at such
You're
a velocity.
sprint deadlines with everything completed.
You haven't got time to do that. Some places will employ people or give people allotted time to write documentation, but for the main part, it's all in people's heads, and it's knowledge transfer rather than by word of mouth, rather than actual written word.
Yes, I agree. And on the topic of that, I think that a big, and maybe you can confirm this, you mentioned that you helped with HR and hiring. I think a big skill that goes really unspoken, at least I haven't heard of it, and I've been helping other students and been really part of the school, is both verbal and written communication. Written being, through text document, commenting, whatever, is that it's not really in the spotlight, but is a huge part of being on a development team, because if you can't communicate clearly what you want to do or what you want to accomplish, no one else will understand you. So I'm not sure, James, if you've taken that into consideration for potential candidates who had the skills but weren't real big communicators, and how you solved that.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, when I am interviewing, my interview process is somewhat unorthodox. I ask some stupid questions. I ask some technical questions, and I see how you react to them. And as you say, it's about that verbal communication, that you can talk to me about something, and you've got that honesty to say, "Oh, I don't know." As long as you're not trying to, for want of a better word, as long as you're not trying to bullshit me when we're sat in an interview, then great. And for me, I would rather that you didn't know all of the technology that we need, but you are a damn good fit for the team. You've got a great personality. I could see where that you would come in and you would sit within the team and how you would gel with them, and that above any technical ability is number one. Number two is technical ability, obviously, and like you've said, communication. I think it's very hard to gauge written communication in an interview process, and every company is different on what they want on a written basis. But as long as you've got reasonable language skills in whatever spoken language we're talking about here that you speak, whether that's English, German, French, whatever it is, as long as you can articulate what you need and what you expect and how you want things to progress with the rest of your team and your management, then it's good. If you come into an interview and you sit there, you mumble, you try to blag your way through the questions, or you just waffle on, it's not a good thing. So, like we've said before, be honest in your interview. If you don't know, say you don't know, and also explain. Maybe you don't know much about it, but you have looked into it and you do know something about it, but not a great deal. But you're willing to learn, and having that ability to be a fast learner as well is always good.
Definitely. I think there's even a course on Coursera, ironically, on learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And it's one of their top courses, I believe. But yeah, there's many different strategies. Unfortunately, I don't know many of them. I haven't taken that course yet, but that's something to definitely, I guess, take into further professional development and getting to where we want to get.
Yeah, and I actually have an episode on how to learn things a little bit quicker, which is through the magic of time shifting is already out, so you can go and take a look at that and see how I approach new programming languages and new technologies to pick them up. Because at the start of 2018, I stated that there were several languages and technologies I wanted to become proficient in this year, and the way that I outline in that talk how I'm going to approach it is how I will approach it, how I am approaching it, to actually take that new skill on board. So the likes of React and AngularJS and things like that, going out there and actually doing something with it, rather than just reading a book about it and reading some blog posts and stuff. But I don't want to take too much away from that episode. So if you want to find out a bit more, go and check that out. I believe it's episode 62, something like that. Let me just check. No, it's episode 61. If you want to go and have a look at how to learn things quicker from my point of view.
That definitely sounds like it'll be a useful resource. Now, I have one final question. I know you should be the one asking questions, but I feel that you can probably relate to this more, especially having been developing. You mentioned you're using the Commodore 64, so not that old, of course, right? But you've been it for quite some time. So when I mentioned the X shape, which is for leaders, do you have any advice to say senior developers listening on how they can become more familiar with other departments working on the same project or program, to the point where they can better utilize their staff and team members?
Yeah, I think something that I have come across and I have seen is that you have a couple of departments that are working on a project. So the very obvious one is the test team or the QA team and the devs. And I've worked in places where things just get thrown over a wall. So the developers just go, yeah, I've done that, chuck it over the wall. And the QAs go, oh, what's this? Oh, I'll pick this up and have a look. And they go, yeah, it passed. Or no, they didn't. And they'll just chuck it back over the wall. And they'll have to wait for one of the developers to come along and go, this has been chucked back, and pick it up. And there was no communication there at all. And one thing that I like to do when I come across teams like that is take people from each team and move them into another team. So for a short period, maybe a couple of days, maybe a week if time permits. So you take a senior developer who's been at the company for 7-8 years or more, and they've been happily just banging away on their keyboard for that time. There's no real process in the company as to how things are managed, and they don't really care or have any interest in knowing what the other departments are doing. You take that person and you sit them with a tester, and they go through and they do all the testing and they learn about testing it, and they can sort of see it from the tester's point of view what they should be doing. And then you could take that tester and sit them with the same dev or a different dev for a time, and then the testers understand what's going on. And you could take a tester or a developer and sit them with the database guys, and then sit them with the infrastructure guys, and it gives them a better overview of actually what's going on. And even to the point where, you know, I've done it in the past. I worked one place and I actually spent 2 weeks where I went around and I sat with customer services and finance and places like that to work out exactly what it was that they were doing with the system, to understand when I came up against problems or was given tasks to do, that I understood their mindset. So I could sit down and be programming away, and it's very easy to slip into that pit of being a developer. I'm going to think about this from a code point of view. But if you've had that experience with the other departments who are eventually going to be using your software, then I think you can sit there and write and go, oh, this would be the cool way to write it. It'd be smart. This would be great. We'll love it. But it's unusable by the user. You can then look at it from the user point of view. Go, this is really complicated. This is overly complicated for what we need. We just need it to do this. We don't need it to do everything else. And I think that follows a little bit on the YAGNI acronym of you ain't going to need it, so don't build it, sort of thing. And I think definitely that spending some time, if you can, in other departments that you work with on a project or a bit of software, I think is invaluable. I think everybody should do it, and every team lead out there should be pushing for it. If they don't do it or they get told no, just keep pushing for it. Your team and every other team are going to benefit for it massively.
And that pretty much verbatim describes the X pattern, being able to support other teams while having, your rooted knowledge and just building from that.
Yeah.
So that supports my argument and why we should use this.
Yeah. So there we go. We took it all the way around in a circle back to those patterns and how these more experienced people should be acting, and that they should be an X pattern rather than a T, or in some cases an I.
Yeah, hopefully. That would be quite the sight for a senior developer to have an I shape, but maybe they're in a more technical position to have a PhD where they're naming their own salary. But I'm sure even at that position, you should have many other skills.
Yeah.
So aside from that, I know I had more of the junior to mid-level insight. Aside from what you just mentioned on more of the senior level, especially with, getting to know the other departments, essentially helping or more so promoting growth with your own team members so they also know, what other advice would you have for senior level?
Well, other advice for them working within their team?
At least based on what we've discussed, because I know we can probably go on for another hour or two if it was an open-ended.
Yeah, I think the things that I often tell seniors and mid levels do is to actually talk to each other in the department. It is very easy to get quite blinkered, and you're in your bug tracking system and you're just hammering away doing those bugs, but you're not talking to anybody within your department. So even within your department, you might have different teams that are working on the same project or projects that are linked together. And I had an example of it not that long ago where I just built a new feature, and I overheard another team talking about a feature they were about to start. And I put it in and said, excuse me, I've just built that. Come and have a look. Showed them it, and they went, do you know what? You've just saved us a month's worth of development because it's already there. We didn't have to re-roll it. So that communication is key. And what I like to do with teams to try and promote that is that I allocate time every week to go and sit down for an hour and a half, and just shoot the breeze a little bit, talk about the tech that's out there, talk about what you're working on. Maybe you've seen something online and you thought, you know what, this would be cool if we could use it because it serves or saves us troubles. It's a solution for this problem that we've got. And you get to talk through it with the team, whereas on a day-to-day basis, you're all sat around, you've got work to do, you may have your headphones in, you just come in, do your 9 to 5, get your job done and go home, and you don't get to talk about these problems. So things never evolve. And because in the teams, you often get those that are a little bit shy, they don't feel that they can speak up, is that I would allocate a topic to one person every week and say, right, on Friday at the team meeting, I want you to go and talk for 5, 10, 15 minutes on a topic of your choice, or if you can't think of one, I'll think of one for you, and you're going to talk to us about it. And it has helped in the past bring these people out of themselves a little bit, out of their shells, and be a little bit more confident. I had one member of the team who was very, very painfully shy when I came into the team, and I remember quite vividly towards the end him standing up and shouting at me, telling me to shut up and stop talking and give someone else a turn in the team meeting. And this was from a guy that wouldn't have said boo to his own shadow several months before.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm actually glad that both of us have different perspectives, so we can really tie everything up in this discussion into like a giant bundle for the listener to just digest, and hopefully they can gather a few pieces of insight and apply to their own goals, and whether they're a student or have been in the industry for quite some time, they'll be able to apply it. And then like I mentioned about the industry, we're always learning, so it's very useful.
Yeah, and I think no matter where you are in your career, like I said at the start, every day is a school day. And I think that advice for new people coming into the industry, there's always something that you can take from that if you've been in the industry for a long time, because you may be stagnating in a job that you've been in for a long while and you want to move. And for the most part, you've probably de-skilled yourself a little bit. So you are coming at these jobs and that from afresh. So I would like to feel that there's something from this conversation today for everybody. I know I've definitely taken something from it. I wasn't too aware of these I and T and X skill patterns and things. So that's been very interesting to sort of talk about that and learn a little bit more on that subject. But I think we're a little bit out of time. We've run over quite a little bit today, so I'll take this opportunity to say thank you, Kyle, for coming on and talking to us.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate it. I think we covered a lot, like you mentioned, and I'm just glad to contribute to your cause.
Yeah. It's always good to get people on who are fighting for the same thing, but maybe from a slightly different angle, got a slightly different opinion on it, because it is very easy for me to slip into the role of this is what I think, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is how it is, phase. So getting someone else's opinion on similar topics is always good. So thanks for coming on again, and thanks for you guys out there. Thanks for listening to Cynical Developer. If you haven't checked it out yet, we've now got our swag store online on the website, so you can run over to there and grab some swag. That's at cynicaldeveloper.com/store. I'm James Stoddart, and you've been listening to Kyle Garza talking about moving from a student to a professional developer.
If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help the Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.